maybe we can start by looking. People are being murdered. We have, this guy from Wells Fargo. We have the daughter of the nominated Kirinyaga MCA who was murdered. We have a woman and her 2 daughters who were murdered in Nairobi. Their bodies dumped in different places. Yes. It is. And then we have the case of the Wajir MCA.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it is a troubling thing when you start seeing this kind of things, but the main thing that the country is focusing on is the political end. And it touches also on the interior CS.
Absolutely. And that very department, thank you very much for having me, Fred.
Yes.
And that very Department of Interior, which then has the national mandate to make sure that it handles the issue of security, particularly national security and the security of the Kenyan, civilians, citizens of this country. A big role for any person in such a department. For Kindiki Kithure at this point in time, the current CS. Very unfortunate, Fred, that we have to go through such cases, and yet we hear and see stories of how the police and all their efforts are focused on elsewhere, things that are not a priority. I'm sure you saw the training video of Reverend Tabitha for Femme Ministries, the lady evangelist.
Wairimo Nelson.
And she was saying something that was very, very noble. Is saying that at a time when we should focus on extremely other very important issues that are affecting Kenyans, it's unfortunate that then we are focused, all the efforts are focused on political mechanizations which do not benefit the average person at all. And so my very sincere condolences to all those who have lost their lives. They are all fathers, some of them are parents, others are brothers and sisters. And to lose their lives in such a gruesome manner, and the manner I saw the brother to the human resource manager for Wells Fargo, the brother giving a depiction of how they found the body with gouged eyes, and clearly he died a terrible death.
And that's more or less the same way the Wajir MCA body. His eyes had been gouged out.
We saw Fred during the Gen Z uprising, and we saw how fortunately CCTV footages were able to be retrieved of individuals just walking, armed individuals who you could very much perceive to be trained security men, because now they were masked. You can't really verify. But who appeared to be well-trained security men walking into homes and outlets to collect some of the young men that were being perceived to be participating in what was considered illegal demonstration by the government, even though we have a whole debate of the Bill of Rights and as to how Kenyans can express themselves. And so it brings into picture the questions that then we as Kenyans must prioritize and look at, and I think national security is one of them.
Interesting, because as this focus is, it's like focus. If it's like a person whose house is on fire,
absolutely,
and the lives of his children are at risk, but what he's doing, he's focusing more on watching a movie.
Yeah, securing the properties.
Yes, and the house is on fire. And so you're wondering, please take care of your children first. Absolutely. Take care of the things that matter the most, so that you save the children first, deal with this. All efforts, and we agree with Evangelist Teresia Wairimo, the priorities of this government have just gone upside down.
Absolutely.
To a point whereby we are so focused on the wrong thing, instead of improving the economy and doing all the things that need to be done. Well, we're looking at balloons.
Absolutely, and I think particularly, the National Police Service Commission, which has been for a very long time been a subject of very many intended reforms, and we've had many what you call the committees that are set up to reform the National Police Service. And I think because national security, Fred, is the single most important thing in any country, any state in this world. Fred, you saw on live TV, I must have been somewhere in Iran when Taliban took over their country. It must have been in Iraq. It was on live TV.
Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan.
Yes,
in
Afghanistan.
When the Taliban took over that country and the president had run away and there was a collapse of national security. And you had this big image of one single big plane and everybody's trying to board it.
Yes,
That is a picture of what happens in countries where chaos and when security issues of national security and chaos are not addressed properly, because then nothing else functions. We cannot even discuss economy in such an environment. You first must ensure that there's peace and tranquility in the country and that citizens are able to live in much more orderly lives. Then many other things come into play. So it's very unfortunate that we are at a time when the National Police Service once again is coming into light. And Fred, I don't know, one day we might get maybe a president who's a true reformist, because National Police Service has largely some very good people in it.
Yeah,
it's just
true.
that there's a bunch of people that I know people who are friends and relatives and people that I've known for a long time who are just genuine police officers. They go to work, they do their shifts, they come back in the neighborhood, they mind their business, clearly meaning well, and they're not in any way trying to be the kind of things that sometimes they want to generalize and perceive as the police service. It's just a bunch of elements, particularly those at a level where they're susceptible to being used for political machinations. When now you find such issues that we are facing, like what we have now, which is very unfortunate, and I pray that we can do better.
True, I totally agree. Now let's go to Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua yet again.
Yes.
It looks like everything he touches, instead of turning to gold, is just turning to butter. He's just slippery all through. Even when you think he has a prayer, just things just collapse. I mean, take for instance yesterday's case.
But you see, Fred, we say as Christians that God works in mysterious ways. As it stands today, he still is the substantive Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, because the Senate, the courts, actually had an injunction on the Senate resolution that they've nominated C.S. Kindiki. So as it stands today, the validly seated Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, though now considered impeached, is a Deputy President, is Rigathi Gachagua. He would be home by now. You understand? So as like I'm saying, God works in mysterious ways. So he's still there trying to fight with some extremely valid points being raised by him and the many people that I don't know who's getting into this. Who are these people doing the petitions? You know, Fred, we have almost 30 petitions and there must be somebody behind them.
Yes.
Or is it that Kenyans are very motivated? I was asking myself that somewhere in a court somewhere in Malindi here there's a petition in Kerugoya.
Yes.
I would probably somebody would think that all those are funded cases so that people can go to court. But if not, I also am very happy and glad that Kenyans now are then very familiar of all the issues that are happening in the country to an extent that they're able to question them. And like I said, I think last time I was there, Fred, that the best part of the Rigathi Gachagua going to court is the judicial precedent that is going to be set when it comes to the issue of impeachment of somebody at that level. Because Rigathi Gachagua now sits at the presidency. The same process that this deputy president has gone through is the same process that impeaching of a president goes through. Nobody had ever gone through an impeachment process of a presidential, somebody from the presidency. This then lays the foundation of how to do it better next time if somebody wants to go through an impeachment process.
But my main concern is the precedents we are setting.
Absolutely.
I mean, politics, from my layman perspective, politics has taken such a major role that you almost feel, maybe I'm missing the arguments in court, you almost feel that like the courts are being influenced by the politics of the day.
Which is unfortunate because, Fred, the struggle that took us almost 50 years to get the 2010 Constitution was to be able to ensure that we have strong institutions that then can be able to govern the issues of affecting Kenyans. And that's why then we have the three most important arms of government, which is the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. None of those institutions are bigger than the other. The president and the executive are not employees of the National Assembly. They are neither the employers of the judiciary. In fact, I said it last time here, Fred, from the Chief Justice in the judiciary to the sweeper in the judiciary, none of them is supposed to answer to William Ruto, who is a fellow employee. Legally speaking, politics aside, as a state officer and the head of the executive, he cannot even employ a sweeper. You understand? It's the function of the Public Service Commission or the Judicial Service Commission.
Yes.
And in cases where, for example, we have misconduct even within the judiciary, that's why we have the Judicial Service Commission, which then has a platform where you can petition some of their civil or some of their employees, and they're able to handle and disciplinary matters are taken care. It's a self-governing institution that does not need any direction or any kind of pushback by the president. It's unfortunate. And in instances where it can be proved that this president or any other president in future is also now interfering with the functioning of a third arm of government, it then amounts to what is the first principle of impeachment, which is the gross violation of the Constitution, because then you are literally interfering with the normal functioning of government.
If you look at the National Assembly,
yes,
you look at the Senate,
yes,
as in the dividing lines between the executive and parliament are literally they're non-existent right now.
And Fred, that's the tragedy of where we are as a country, which is not supposed to be the case.
Yes.
Because the moment then you have the legislature, which I've said has no business entertaining any other member of the executive. It is not their job. You understand? It's presumed by the Constitution and the drafters of this Constitution that, fortunately for the 2020 Constitution, we were there. I saw the draft copy from the very beginning. Is that the president then the executive, which controls a lot of our functions and resources, that's why it's given two arms to oversight it. The legislature in terms of in terms of law and order, and the judiciary, which then is to make sure that it keeps in check those that are working in government. These two institutions are never ever supposed to be beholden to the executive. But now that we have a parliament that has, even when you look at the margin of votes, Fred, it's always a Herculean task to even be able to raise 233 people, a quorum like that in parliament.
Yes.
Even on a day when you're discussing an important bill like the social health insurance fund bill, those are very important bills, but you'd never get such a quorum. To be able to mobilize such a number to be able to impeach this deputy president at 281 or 291, it shows you just how much this parliament has been fully captured by the executive, which I truly believe is a tragic end, because then it means anything else can pass. This president could actually, if not for the requirement that you must have a referendum to change the term limit of a presidency, because there's a proposal.
Yes, there's a proposal.
Which you know is a wasting time. It will take just one high court decision and that one is thrown out. But you see, they're testing the patience of Kenyans to hear what Kenyans can say. Whoever drafted that bill and is trying to present it as Cherargei, or I don't know if the senators doing that, is truly just trying to pull the leg of Kenyans. And maybe he was not in this country in June because he would have first. That is much worse.
What can happen?
Fred, that is much worse than even the finance bill.
Oh yes.
That's a much worse.
That one, I can join the demonstrations myself.
I'm telling you. So the spirit of the Constitution was that these are three arms of government, Fred, that they operate independently but interdependently where they are needed to, because they all serve the same people. But they are not supposed to be in the context of what we have now, where then you have a whole parliament that now fully answers to the executive and a big section of the judiciary.
Yes, and when you look at how the judiciary is conducting itself now, and then you listen to the arguments on the floor of you listen to the arguments in court by the different representatives, you get a feeling. And you know, the thing about justice is that it must not just be done, it must be seen to have been done.
Absolutely.
As in, if I start feeling or perceiving that there's probably interference in this judiciary, then that eats away on the confidence that I have in that arm of government.
Even a regular Kenyan who did not sit in a criminal procedure class like I did to understand how certain legal processes are supposed to go through, or who hasn't read the constitutional provision of how an impeachment is supposed to be conducted, and the timelines that are supposed to, you're supposed to remember. After the decision of Parliament, the Senate had actually 7 days to be able to begin to listen to this matter. They did it the next day. And after the decision of the Senate, the president had 14 days to be able to take his humble time and get the best person that is supposed to replace this deputy president. The president did it midnight. In the morning they had that. Even somebody that doesn't know criminal procedure can tell you that there is something is just not right in how this process is being taken, and there's a clear intention to be able to infringe on the rights of that particular person, and they do not even want the guy who currently is the victim of this process to even get a proper hearing in court. It's unfortunate because today it's very easy. I've always said, for somebody that never supported Rigathi Gachagua, it's very easy for you to want to celebrate what is going through. But Fred, tomorrow I could be the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya. I would want to go through a fair process in the event that I have a fallout with whoever is my boss. And I would want to, what I would wish myself to go through at that particular time is what I would want to wish him, the Rigathi Gachagua, to go through, regardless of whether or not I like him. Because it's not just about Rigathi Gachagua.
Yes.
If we allow for it to be normal, for things to be conducted the way they're being conducted, Fred will have opened the floodgates for future elections, where we'll have government fallouts, and then we'll go through such processes which in many cases is being considered as shambolic. Yes.
I listened to the arguments yesterday. One of the grounds that was being challenged was the right of the Deputy Chief Justice to appoint a panel. Our Chief Justice is neither dead, neither mentally incapacitated,
or out of town.
Or yes, in fact, as that matter was being discussed, the deputy, the Chief Justice was at Makadara Law Courts, just as a stone throw away from here. And in my mind, I could read, maybe this is what I perceived. She was telling the country, I am around. I am around.
I think, Fred, that's a very clear case of insubordination and ill motive, regardless of what you do. Because the person that is, we do not disagree. We do not disagree that there are moments where the Deputy Chief Justice can be able to act on behalf of the Chief Justice.
Yes.
But I think where we have a problem is that you can clearly see ill motive as to why he made such a hurried decision in the middle of the night.
Yes.
And the question was that where was the hurry?
Yes.
In the middle of the night, and the question was, where was the hurry for them to want to do it in the middle of the night? Where they were actually petitioning against a decision that had been done in Kerugoya. But that decision was being injected in Nairobi at midnight before the daybreak. So that, and then go through an entire process of appointing the bench, listening to the matter, and giving the decision by midnight. It shows that there was clearly ill motive from the Deputy Chief Justice, and I think just like what we are facing in the executive, we might face that in the judiciary. Fred, it's not a lie, like I've said, that there are Kenyans who mean well and want to just do their jobs and go home. That also applies in the judiciary. There are people there who've been, particularly judges that have been heroic. You know, the very famous Justice Odunga.
Yes.
A very firm guy at a time when the judiciary was being tested as to its independence, and he still continuously stood his ground over the years. And Justice Mumbi Ndungu, I think, also a very firm judiciary. So you cannot rule out the fact that we have some very, very hardworking members in the judiciary who mean well and want to do their jobs. But we might face a situation where then, clearly based on what we are seeing with the Deputy Chief Justice, Fred, that is an outright case of insubordination.
Yeah, how do you appoint?
It's an outright case of insubordination.
As in, whichever way you look at it,
there was ill motive as to how it was done. Even when you look at the rush, what Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu has done has just emulated what was happening in the Parliament, to really be in a rush to execute some illegal duties, so that just to be able to meet a certain goal. And I think Kenyans should be able to see that somebody might go to court. I'm told, I was just sharing, somebody was telling me, we're actually going to petition the Judicial Service Commission on the conduct of the Chief Justice. The best part about Rigathi Gachagua's legal team is that he has all these lawyers and interested parties that are able to handle his case from different angles. You know, even the case of sitting on the bench has nothing to do with the impeachment. It's just something else. And you see, that simple injunction then says, until we exhaust this issue of the bench that is to hear the matter cannot be heard. So then this, remember, if regardless of what decision they gave yesterday, I know somebody might be going to the Court of Appeal today.
Because he opened, the judges opened it up
yeah,
for
they have
appeal.
to, first of all, to question the bench. It's part of hearing what you call a fair access to fair justice and fairness. You know,
Yes.
he has a right to get a bench that will listen to him without bias.
Yes.
You can, how do I sit and face a judge bench that sat overnight to
Yes.
decide my fate?
And then they come and decide. They are the ones who are to decide what we did was illegal.
Exactly. It can work. So I am sure of it. I'm sure when we leave here, because it's an early morning,
Yes.
by 9 p.m. when the court's open,
Yes.
somebody will definitely be at the appeal court, and that is to buy time. Fred, you just need one single issue that is acceptable. Of these very many issues that have been raised, whether public participation was correct, whether the nomination process was correct, whether Kindiki qualifies to be nominated, because the president has a right to nominate somebody else.
Yes.
But as it stands now, because all this process is time-bound, Kindiki is the nominee. If he doesn't qualify, that whole process collapses.
Before we get to the nomination of Kindiki,
Yes.
which has so many grounds on which you can, if the matter goes before
A credible
judge, that case can be cut into pieces.
Yes.
But back to the DCJ Mwilu's situation, appointing the panel,
Yes.
the CJ, the conditions under which, if my memory serves me right in the arguments, the conditions under which the DCJ can appoint a panel are clearly laid out.
Absolutely. And first of all,
that threshold was not met.
And exactly. But you see, the trigger to him now exercising those rights is the absence of the Chief Justice.
Yes.
There's a critical factor there. So when you begin to act on behalf of somebody who's actually on duty, it tells you that actually there's a insubordination there, and it can be questioned all through. So there's no debate that the conduct of, and it takes us to the days of Bernard Chunga, the old days of Nyaya, when judges would even be lifted from beds to give decisions. So they follow a judge to his bedroom to just sign a document that he has given this guy. And that is the last place Fred would want to see our country head to, right? Because we've come a long way from those days when we had such misconduct in the judiciary, because that is the very thing that led us to the war, to the fights that we had in 2007. Fred, I keep saying, the reason why people went to the streets is because they had no confidence in the institution.
Yes.
If you had confidence in the institution, then there would be no Raila, no peace, and all these things. Then we'd have a proper court session and people would listen to the results. And that's why the importance of the 2017 decision by Maraga was a key impetus, a key indicator that then in future these courts can be bankable. So next time if you're running for president, you can say, I want to go to court and question the process. That is because we believe that the institution is working. So you do not want to be in a situation where, Fred, you have a people that does not believe in one of the arms of government that's supposed to serve them. Because if that fails, Fred, then once the people have no belief in that institution, then the country can collapse much faster. I've told you
because the people will look for ways to.
You know, Fred, it's very easy for President William Ruto to contain the 290 members of parliament and the 47 senators. But what you saw in June were the masses. That one you can't control it. Because if that was to be sustained for a week, we would be talking of different things.
Yes.
True or false?
True.
If that, what we saw that, because it had never happened in our country, where you had civilians minus any politician, you could not say it's an ODM rally.
In fact, they didn't want politicians there.
They didn't even want politicians there. Those are the people I'm saying. If those people begin to, because on that day the indicator was that we do not believe, we no longer have faith in this National Assembly, which I think we all now agree, based on how the parliament has been conducted itself. They have failed to do their jobs, and it has become like an appendage of the executive, which is a dangerous place to be. So the very last hope is the judiciary. Now, what happens if they also do not believe in the judiciary? Fred, we know the outcomes of what happens when then the people have no confidence in the institution. Then it's a civil war. It's not something that we would want to wish this country. For anybody that means well, that wants this country to grow, then that is the last place we need to be. And so anybody that is trying to take us toward that trajectory, Fred, I think is an enemy of the people.
And you know, again, the Chief Justice is around his own duty. The other side presented a letter claiming to be from the Chief Justice, saying that she's out of the country or something like that. And at the last part, she gives ways in which they can contact her and she'll be in touch. You see, and that letter was not even stamped. So she's telling you, if there are things that need to be done, and they can only be done by the Chief Justice, I am around, reach me, these are my contacts. That is if she was out of the country.
Yeah.
But evidently,
she's around. And you know, Fred, what's going to be really awkward is that knowing very well that Rigathi Gachagua or whoever that is petition that specific issue, because now that we have a lot of petitions, is that it will eventually go to the Court of Appeal and maybe make it to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court bench will have to sit, which is headed by the Chief Justice. And that same Deputy Chief Justice will also be there. I can believe she'll probably be outnumbered in that panel because clearly it's an act of insubordination, and also painting the picture of the judiciary as being a political arm of government. Because that conduct of Deputy Mwilu indicates that he was probably lying towards what the government wants to achieve. And that does not paint well the picture of the judiciary. Fred, I keep telling you, and I always never fail to remind you, that we cannot afford to lose the judiciary. Because if we lose the judiciary, we will lose the country. Absolutely.
So now, the deputy, the designate. Kindiki Kithure. He's still in office. In fact, yesterday, the Senate was confused as to how they were going to proceed. Because the Interior CS had been summoned, Kindiki. Now, when the matter came on the floor of the House, Kindiki was obviously a no-show. And now the argument started. So, how is he the Interior CS or is he the Deputy President?
I am telling you now, that alone, and that's what I'm telling you, you don't even need to be a legal mind, friend, to see that. There's a problem there. Because there's no day in the Kenyan 2010 constitution where it's presumed you can be a deputy president and a cabinet minister. That provision is not there. And even though you can become a deputy president even as a cabinet minister, there is a legal procedure of how that is done. It's well captured in the IBC Act and the legal process of how a deputy president is nominated in the event that there's vacuum in that space. Because that one was captured when we had the issues of how do you reappoint the deputy governor. And that bill that came into parliament that was able now to cover even the presidency. That's why there's that legal procedure of 7 days after the Senate. And for the Senate, 7 days, then the Senate picks up the matter. It has to conclude within 14 days. And then after 14 days, the president has 14 days to appoint, to present a name to parliament for voting, which then parliament has 60 days to be able to decide and elect that person. It's a very long procedure. That procedure is still there. So today as we speak, Honorable Kithure Kindiki is a state officer and a cabinet secretary. That alone nullifies the whole process of...
because he's supposed... the person appointed...
He's supposed to be a civilian. And not a sitting cabinet minister. And if he were one, there's a timeline that he was supposed to have resigned before he takes the appointment.
60 or 90 days.
Yes, 90 days, actually legally, because then the process of nominating a candidate for presidency, because that's what happens. It's only that now there's a window here because it's not on a general election. That's why it's covered like that. But the process still applies that he has to cease being a member of a partisan group, which is a political party, or a state officer at that particular time. And so at the time when there's there's something what you call statutory documents, friend. Those are the legal documents that are used to pass decision, the Gazette notice. So if the president gazetted the name of Kithure Kindiki. I'm confused with this name. But if he gazetted his name that Friday morning as a nominee, knowing very well that he's still a cabinet secretary of the Republic of Kenya, that whole thing gets nullified at that point. Because then it's a legal document, isn't it? The Gazette notice is a proper document by government. So for him to gazette such a person, then the whole process gets nullified. He's supposed to redo that process. But now, that would mean then he has to face it has to go through another fresh process to get to that level, because the impeachment process is time bound. That's why it spends in parliament a certain time, then he has 7 days to go into Senate. It's time bound. So you cannot come back and say that I'm getting another name based on what was decided. That again now gives even Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua a window to be around, because I think it should be around 6 months before any other impeachment can come, because that's how the governor of Kericho survived the impeachment. It was a narrow escape, I think 1 vote or something like that. And you see now they can't impeach him today.
Yes.
They have to wait for another 6 months to be able to come back and impeach him.
No wonder he was telling them, I am sorry for what I did, let's work together.
Yeah, because he knows that. So there's that window for
Yes.
us. So Fred, the technicality here, unless the judiciary completely goes far away from the constitution provision and the acts of parliament, the deal breaker here is how to determine three things, Fred. Does the nominee qualify at
Yes.
that point of being nominated and gazetted
Yes.
to become a nominee for that position? The answer is no, because as at that time, he had not done three basic things.
He had not resigned.
He had not resigned, he had not been cleared by IBC, and he was still a member of a political faction. Those three nullifies that gazette notice at that point. That alone changes this whole thing. Regardless of what we decide, or because there's the other debate of the allegations. Because you see, Fred, I can't just come and allegate that you're a criminal, having not gone through a criminal process where you've been convicted. This president is a beneficiary of such a decision because he was at ICC for very serious crimes. But the Supreme Court said, until when he goes through the process and is charged, he still remains innocent until proven guilty. So there is no court in this country or on earth, Fred, there is no court on earth, 200 countries, that has convicted Rigathi Gachagua for any crime.
Yes.
On record. Because you see, in parliament you can do politics, but in court you have to present evidence and say this is somebody that has criminal tendencies.
Yes.
He has gone through criminal procedure and he's actually been convicted for these specific crimes, which are gazetted. You know, when a judgment is passed by a judge,
yes,
there's something you can bring on the table and say this is a convict. Otherwise, all those things that you had Mwangi Mutuse say become mere allegations. It's just political brinkmanship. It's a mere allegation because Rigathi Gachagua. Two, accusations like he had on the tribal issues.
Yes.
Me and you can have our own personal sentiments as to his conduct. But you see, he has never even been summoned even one time with the NCIC to say that, you know, as a state officer, you've conducted yourself in a manner that is divisive. Nowhere. Even if it's true.
Yes.
Fred, we can witness through a window here somebody assaulting another person.
Yes.
Legally, that is an assault. It's a criminal offense under the Kenya's penal code.
Yes.
But you see, that person being hit is supposed to go to the police station, get an OB, go to the hospital, get his P3. Then with that, then go to court. So there is something
you can present
to validate
this.
for the investigation officer at the police station who now handles your case to now pursue the matter. Otherwise, we cannot sit and assume those processes can happen on themselves. So we cannot sit and assume, and all those allegations that Rigathi Gachagua was facing, they could be true, but they've not been proven in any competent process that we have there. So it completely nullifies them. So it's tough because then CS Kindiki Kithure today, even as it stands, Fred, he's still the CS or Cabinet Secretary of the Republic of Kenya. How on earth does he become a DP? Because you know, when you resign, it's also gazetted. You have to write a letter to the president, write a letter to the Parliamentary Service Commission, so that then to IBC, so that there's a legal process that shows that you've resigned as a state officer.
Yes. So
that then the chairman of IBC, who's the returning officer, receives a form of copy that Fred is no longer cabinet secretary.
Now, in the absence of the
that one even now pushes this whole process for good.
Because the chairman of the IBC is the returning officer for the presidential.
And one of the most important decisions that then the court, at whatever level it would be, maybe the High Court, Court of Appeal, or even the Supreme Court if it gets there, is to decide on the role of the IBC on this matter. Because then Kindiki Kithure, remember, if him or any other nominee that is nominated by this president, if he's nominated and gets validly sworn in as a deputy president, assumes all the powers of a president in the event the president ceases to be president for all the reasons that we know that are legally provided for. So for that reason then, the eligibility of that person is critical. That's a decision that then is going to be made by the courts. And that one could decide whether this matter continues or not. Because if it doesn't, then Kindiki was not validly nominated. The president is free to nominate any other person.
Yes.
But he was not validated. This then gives a window for Gachagua and others to go and politic and come back maybe after a year. And you see, in a year's time, we'll be doing other things. We'll not probably be dealing with this impeachment thing.
Yes.
So those three things, the court has to make a very clear and firm decision in the interest of the people and the future of this country.
Let me ask you, for the benefits of us, the lay people,
yes,
why do you think there was such a rush to vacate the conservatory orders?
Because then they wanted to catch the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua so that he's out of time in terms of the legal appeals. But unfortunately, the technical, they didn't see through the details, the legal details, because they satisfied the parliamentary procedure. That happened. That one, they were within their nani. But now where the issues of the questions are being raised on the process, that the allegations and the process of nominations, the qualifications, approvals of the candidate, those are the technicalities they didn't see through it. You understand? Because then with the IBC, then this whole process stalls.
Because the name has to be presented
by
to
the
them.
IBC, because of the amount of role, and this is where now the Supreme Court, you know, in law, Fred, they say the judiciary is a quasi-lawmaker. That means even though the role of legislation is that of the National Assembly, but the decisions that are made in courts are sometimes
Become law.
They become law. Like the issue of minor kiai or
Yes.
the validity of the vote. You know, it's not expressly provided in the Constitution, but then the court had to decide at what point is the vote casted that is valid. That's why they said it's at the polling station, and that whatever is decided at the polling station is final, and that nobody can change the number, even if it was a typing error and you write 8 instead of 3. You cannot take a pen and correct until you go to a competent court. Those are decisions that are not expressly provided in the Constitution, but you see the judiciary gives directions over it, because then it has a mandate to interpret what the Constitution perceived. And so it will be very interesting on the issue of IBC clearing the nominee, and the issue of resignation, you know, those nitty-gritties that are there. Those are the issue of public participation, what is considered as the true and actual participation process, and how wide must it cover. Because back then I would just congregate some characters at County Hall here and we decide that we did some public participation.
Yes.
But if a matter of such serious magnitude like the presidency, then it means we have to go back to, actually now the constituency, as the High Court gave a direction, is actually supposed to go to the wards, so that at the ward level people can actually decide. Somebody might even question and say, maybe zero the polling station.
Yes.
So that everybody goes back to his polling station to
And
decide
you give views.
for public participation. And you know, it's going to cover not just the issue of the presidency and electoral matters. There are other public issues that usually go through public participation. That would mean, especially on legislation.
Yes.
And I really want that to be the one thing that we achieve with this process, is that the National Assembly, for any decision it passes, particularly a decision that affects a large number of Kenyans, is that there must be a minimum set threshold, which ought to be there because there's a public participation bill that is currently gaining dust at Kimani Ichung'wah's desk.
Yes.
You know, the majority leader.
Yes.
There is a bill for that. I don't know the details. I had read it briefly the time when it was a draft, and I'm going to follow up on it, because in there then we need to have such amendments so that on issues to do with the legislation that are of public interest, we must even say that public participation must be conducted by the Parliamentary Service Commission at the ward level. Because in every constituency, including mine, because I know my mother is part of it, is that we have a Parliamentary Service Commission committee in every constituency. It's actually there. So through those Parliamentary Service Commission committees in the constituency, we are able to actually do public participation at that level. So the serious matters like this was of trying to extend the term limit of the presidency meet the anger and the pressures of the people at the ground, the way we saw that day.
You know, the Dutch says that he that carries butter on his head should not go and expose himself to the midday sun.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of exposure, because the precedents that these judges have set is so low.
Very true.
Because now the next thing we are going to have, and maybe it will happen even in
this president.
Yes, in the time of this president, the Deputy Chief Justice is going to is going to set up a bench to hear something probably the government is not.
Fred, you can imagine.
In favor of.
You can imagine, you know, today is Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua.
Yes.
And where Rigathi Gachagua comes from is actually the main political base of this president. And clearly he's losing that side. What that means, Fred, it would only take ODM to swap and they can impeach this president.
If
just
ODM
changes,
yes,
at this point in time,
yes,
because President William Ruto's members of parliament from his central rift are not more than 30
yes,
in the National Assembly. Those are the people you can say they can die with him. But Fred, if ODM just switches to the other side, even in the Senate,
yes,
because the president has only 6 senators in the Senate who are his own.
Yes.
If the other people, and you saw Senator Mayhew and the others, they objected this process.
Yes.
And that is what you call his political base. All the 6 senators in the mountain largely did not vote for this impeachment. And we saw it. So you can imagine what happens if ODM was just to change its mind. It would send this president home, and yet he's already set precedence of how fast this process can go.
Yes.
Then it can be the first victim of this very process. That's why they say sometimes when you craft laws, Fred, they say that try and craft those laws with your worst enemy in mind. What happens if I'm setting all the tables for Alan to suffer, and tomorrow
Alan
is the operations manager of this institution?
Yes.
I would be in problems. You understand?
Yes.
So this president, I think, has to be careful. But I have some little faith in the judiciary, Fred, because the issues being raised are very critical. The role of IBC, the role of validity of a nomination, and the charges being brought in either Parliament or in the Senate. That you must not just bring allegations. You must bring convicted results where it's actually somebody has gone through the process and this person is charged, and there's something to show that we said you are corrupt, you've been convicted by an anti-corruption court, or you're a criminal, the criminal court has sent you to jail. That is a valid decision that then you can carry and take it to the National Assembly, so that then the National Assembly can only make decision based on real accusations and not just allegations, mere allegations, because the Constitution says any Kenyan is innocent until when proven guilty.
Yes.
So when you look at what has happened with this deputy president, all those things, regardless of whether they're true or not, but he has not gone through any criminal procedure to be able to justify that they were valid allegations.
So if we get a true judge, a judge who believes in the Constitution, he might get a prayer.
Yeah, and the judiciary, that's what I'm saying, has an important role to rescue this country even in future processes. We might look at Rigathi Gachagua and maybe be emotional and make decisions based on whether you like him or not. But if you look at, that's even me how I'm looking at it, what happens tomorrow, Fred, when you're the deputy president? What would happen to you? Anybody that looks at it from that angle would understand the role of this judiciary and what they're supposed to do in as far as the procedure, the impeachment procedures are concerned, so that we settle those cases today. We do not have to go back to law, because part of the duty of the judiciary, as we've said, is to interpret what the law meant. You understand? And so sometimes we might lack the express provisions either in the Constitution or in the Acts of Parliament that actually guide this process, but they have a role to decide on, and I think they would be very critical in as far as the stability of this country is concerned if they make very firm and clear decisions that are in the interest of everybody and not just currently the partisan political interest.
Now let me ask you, if you are a lawyer and you are part of either Rigathi or the people on his side, the different cases, would you have confidence that justice will be served today? Taking into consideration what has transpired.
Fred, the beauty of the judiciary is that it has a way of checking itself. This is a decision, could be a decision of the High Court. It still has a chance to go to the Court of Appeal, to the Supreme Court, and he has also a right to question the conduct of any judiciary official through the Judicial Service Commission. So that already paints a picture of a very elaborate process that he can go through before we conclude as to whether or not he'll get justice in court. Because I truly believe in that judiciary, Fred. Even though there are people that we can question their conduct based on how they've behaved, particularly like what this Deputy Chief Justice has done, she's taken us back to the Kanu days of how people in the judiciary used to conduct themselves, because Nyayo used to get judges from their homes to make decisions for Kanu those days, and she's taken us to such a, clearly that was a prompted decision, because it was out of the normal working hours, and only the Chief Justice can decide for a court to sit beyond the working hours based on the meritocracy, the urgency of the matter. But when you look at the Rigathi Gachagua's case, it was not very urgent. She could have done it any other day. But we still have judges in this judiciary that truly mean well. And I think Rigathi Gachagua has a chance across board to be able to exhaust that before we come up to such a conclusion.
All right. Thank you very much, Ngaira, for that. With that, we got to bring down the curtains on the show. Ah, my goodness. Let's pray for the judiciary of this country. Let's literally just pray for the three arms of government, because, you know, they make policy, one of the other, you know, executes, and the other makes sure that our rights are not being infringed against by the two arms of government and by your neighbor. So we need to pray for them so that sanity prevails, because if we lose it in the judiciary, then we've lost it. Because even the throne of God is established on the foundation of justice. And that's what we need in this country. To have ourselves a lovely morning. Your faith today will be coming in a couple of minutes with Reverend Felix Kavoy.